BYU falls to Texas Tech 29-7. Mitch Harper, Kyle Ireland here in Lubbock, Texas, Jones AT&T Stadium. Kyle, where do we begin? This was a tough day for BYU. I think just dominated in all facets. I think the BYU defense showed well. They did everything they could to keep BYU in this game, but Texas Tech's really good, and BYU's got a lot of work to do and go back to the drawing board here.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the extended pregame show this morning, Mitch. BYU had to be on their A game today, and unfortunately for the Cougars, all three facets weren't on their A game today. I mean, the defense, I thought, played well, like you said, and they gave up some chunk plays here and there, but for the most part, they did keep this, a game for a good chunk of the afternoon and early morning, but the offense and special teams, the miscues, the lack of rhythm that the offense, was suffering today. And, you pair that with a top 10 team in Texas Tech who really, the offense from Texas Tech, I don't think was the shining star today for them. I mean, they played well at times and, had some good plays and good drives, but the defense was outstanding from Texas Tech. They really the front seven prevented Bear Bachmeier from winning this game or getting the game going for BYU. They really kept him in check. They made him look like a true freshman today. And then the secondary made it so that BYU wasn't able to stretch the field at all. And so BYU was really just limited.
Texas Tech linebacker Jacob Rodriguez, you bring up that Tech defense, you got to start with him. 14 tackles for the day. He had a tackle for loss. He also had an interception on Bear Bachmeier. Then he also had a fumble recovery on the backwards pass that Bear had in the fourth quarter. Rodriguez, there was chance of Heisman for him. But for BYU, they come out of the bye week, Kyle, and it just seemed a little shell-shocked to Texas Tech's speed and physicality. I think BYU is a physical football team, and the BYU defense was inviting that style of play. I thought the way that BYU's defense came out with the sacks, Sialia Sarah, Jack Kelly, and then Isaiah Glasker gets in the mix, I thought that was exciting to see from BYU, but the offense just had no answers. And remember, LJ Martin, not full strength, he plays in this game, and he only gets 10 carries in this game. And I asked Kalani Sitake in the postgame if that was by design to only give him a limited amount of carries, or did he have a setback and he wasn't healthy enough to get more touches. Kalani noted that I can't even remember exactly what Kalani said in that answer. I'd have to go back and listen to it, but still, BYU had no answers for Texas Tech defense. I thought their defensive front was excellent. I just think the athleticism and speed from Texas Tech, they're really impressive. They didn't have any sacks in this game, but, Texas Tech, to me, they were always around Bear Bachmeier, making everything difficult for him. Actually, they had one sack in this game to BYU's 4, but it was a difficult day for BYU's offense, and they just never found their footing. And I think what's interesting, too, Kyle, is that they were down 13-0 at the half, and you thought, okay, they're still getting a little bit outplayed, but the defense was keeping them in the mix, and you're thinking, okay, Raider DeMooney gets that pass breakup to close out the first half. They get a red zone stand. You're thinking, okay, BYU's used to this spot. This is where they thrive. They'll go into the halftime locker room and, really make a run at this thing, but they never did.
Yeah, and even to start the second half, they had a 3-and-out that they forced on Texas Tech's opening drive of the third quarter, where you're like, okay, back-to-back stops, the way the second quarter ended with Raider DeMooney, Falatau, Satuala having, back-to-back big plays there to really just, they gave BYU an opportunity to take some momentum, and they can never do anything. They never found any rhythm. You mentioned LJ Martin, 1 carry for 4 yards in the second half. It's just not going to get it done when LJ finishes the game with 35 yards on the ground.
And we've talked about it a lot. We always bring this up, but the season goes as far as LJ Martin will take you. And what was interesting, too, was Texas Tech completely erased Bear Bachmeier's ability to have the quarterback draws up the heart of a defense. Bear has been feasting like an actual bear in the middle of defenses this year. Not this Texas Tech team. With Lee Hunter in the middle, that wasn't going to happen. So when you don't have LJ Martin at full strength, it's a little bit concerning. And BYU's got to adjust and find different ways to really attack and have success offensively. It also doesn't help, too, Kyle. This BYU team, I think it highlighted the very thin margin for error this group has. They kind of, I don't want to say they live on the edge, but when they don't play complementary football, you can have outcomes like this. And one of the phases of the game for BYU was not good today at all. Special teams. You had a shanked punt, opening drive, Sam Vanderhaar. That Texas Tech starts on their own 40. BYU's defense rises up with the Cialia Sarah sack. They get the 3 and out. You're thinking, okay, all things equal, first drive's out of the way. BYU's going to get the ball back. Here you go. Go get the lead. Parker Kingston, muff punt. You can't have that happen. That was things that were happening earlier in the year when Kingston was banged up. That reared its ugly face again. Turnovers were costly. And what's interesting, too, is BYU has 3 turnovers, Texas Tech 0. BYU's defense held strong. Texas Tech only scored 6 points off those 3 turnovers, but still it felt like the momentum and any hope of BYU scoring first, because we know BYU is so good when they score first, that went out the door when Parker Kingston muffed that fumble or that punt.
And you talked about this with Kalani Sitake. You asked him about, potential slow starts and that becoming a habit in the post game. You brought that up to coach, and it seems like in Big 12 play, Mitch, this is really becoming a habit with this team where, I think he may have been like, offensively, defensively, like what are we talking about, slow starts? But it's like as a team, like,
Sure.
You think about the Colorado game, the way that game started
14-0.
defensively, and then like this game offensively, like it's not necessarily
Iowa State 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's not habitually with one side of the ball where it's just the offense that's having issues. It's like this team is finding a way to eke out wins, but they're not collectively as all 3 phases playing close to 60 minutes of football.
And you can't live in a space where you're always facing double-digit deficits.
Yeah.
It's going to bite you eventually, and it did when you go up against a Texas Tech team that I honestly believe is one of the best teams in college football. I think Texas Tech offense wasn't perfect by any stretch. Even Baron Morton said in the postgame they didn't feel like they played their best game offensively, but BYU's defense, you got to give some credit to them. And I think if you want to say, does BYU pass an eye test, it's definitely defensively. I thought they responded well and did everything they could to really keep BYU in this game. But Texas Tech's got a defensive front that I think can go toe-to-toe with anyone. I really do. I think this is a group with David Bailey, Romello Height. They were as good as advertised, man. They are really good. And, again, from the moment this game kicked off, David Bailey was just in the zip code, in the area code, hovering. That first play, he's generating a pressure. You're thinking this is going to be that type of day. BYU's offensive line had some struggles. Isaiah Jada had a couple penalties in this game. BYU as a team, 5 penalties for 37 yards. It was a tough day. Is there anything you'd come from this, though, and say that was a positive that BYU can build on going into another tough game next week against TCU?
Yeah, you talked about the sacks earlier, Mitch. I thought that this was a nice performance from BYU's front 7 to be able to get home to the quarterback, because this Texas Tech offensive line, this offense as a whole is good. Like they had one bad performance this season. It wasn't that bad. I mean, they lost by 4 points to, Arizona State on the road, and it was with a backup quarterback. And so you take that one and you say, okay, like all things considered, that's quote unquote a good loss. And so, this is a good team that they played and were able to get a lot of pressure in the backfield. I thought, Isaiah Glasker and Jack Kelly, the bye week, the health problems those guys have had in particular this season, I thought that they, as a linebacker group, Cialia Sarah, they all looked good today. And then, Raider Dumuni comes back from injury today, and, I thought that he had a nice performance as well. It's just, defensively, they had their stars show up, but you think about Evan Johnson, Therian Alexander III, those guys had interception opportunities, and BYU has been a team that's been able to make those big plays when they've, had the opportunities presented for the most part this season. And today, they didn't. They weren't able to come away, and, it's a game of inches, and, it's cliche, but people say it for a reason. And it's like, Evan Johnson, it looks like an interception. He's waiting for that ball, and the wind kind of carries it a little bit further. But if he attacks that ball there as opposed to waiting for it, what does an interception at that moment do for BYU to gain some momentum in the first half? So it's just little things like that where if BYU wants to get to where they hope to be in Arlington later this season, they have to be able to do that throughout the final 3 games of the regular season.
BYU's defense only gave up 149 yards, but when you do dive into the numbers, the 2 running backs for Texas Tech combined for 198, 5.5 per pop. Cameron Dickey and Jacoby Williams. BYU's got to get better on the run defense. I thought that is an area where they've got to improve. Now, the final number, again, that factors in sack yardage and minus 47 for Baron Morton, but the running backs were having success for Texas Tech.
Sure, and that was a bunch in the second half, Mitch. They only had 53 in the first half.
They've got to get more stout there, and I think also, too, they got to get some takeaways. And to your point about Evan Johnson, I think that was a big miss. I think also, too, the wide receivers, they've got to help Bear Bachmeier. We'll hit on Bear Bachmeier here, but, JoJo Phillips, he comes back, first game since September 6th. He drops a pass. There was some passes where Bear, maybe it's putting Chase in a spot where he's got to go dive for a ball, but you got your hands on him. You got to go catch that football. Parker Kingston had a drop, obviously, that muff punt, and Parker got a little bit nicked up at the end of the game, about 2-minute timeout. He goes near to the sideline, fell to the ground, was being looked at by trainers. Kalani Satake said, Parker's going to be fine. He's okay. He just took a hard hit. But those are some areas, too, where BYU has to get better. And I think the run defense is an area where I want to see continued improvement for this BYU defense. But on the talking point of Bear Bachmeier, 23 of 38 for the true freshman signal caller. First loss as a college player in his BYU career. 188 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 INT, completion rate of 61%. Running the football, 11 carries, 12 yards. It was an eraser moment for Texas Tech in that defense against Bear. Your thought on how Bear played, and was this maybe too big of a stage for him as a true freshman, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because you're like, college game day was here. It's a top 10 matchup. First time in program history, both teams in the game have been in the top 10 for BYU. And I don't know how much to lean into was it too big of a moment as opposed to this was just a really good defense that he was facing, and he hadn't played against a team that was like Texas Tech's defense. David Bailey, the fact that he was constantly around Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin around the football and just made things difficult. Jacob Rodriguez, you brought up his interception and the tough plays that he's been able to make this season. This team, they were a top 10 team also for a reason, and their fans were hyped and ready to go for this matchup. And so I just think that maybe it wasn't too big of a game for Bear as opposed to it just was a really good team, a really good test. And, Chase Roberts talked about being able to face this Texas Tech team potentially later on this season and in the conference championship game if BYU is able to win out. I think that, I'm interested to see how Bear responds from a loss for the first time in his college career and what that does for BYU down this home stretch, because BYU still has everything in front of them. And maybe it can be one of those things where the pressure of being 8-0, undefeated, top 10, all that kind of goes to the wayside a little bit, where BYU can look at this game and really evaluate themselves in maybe a deeper way than they would have otherwise.
I think the fear coming out of this game, because there's no shame losing by 22 to an 8th-ranked team in the country. This is a top 10 team. You wish you would have played better in your first ever top 10 matchup. There's no shame, though, in losing to this Texas Tech team. I think I don't want to say concern or fear, but it's just, I think for Cougar fans watching this or listening to this, I think they fear that this team's going to get faded in the poll. They're going to go and they're going to have a 3-touchdown loss, and the playoff committee is going to say, "Yep, they're a fraud." And even though they're 8-1 and they were number 7 in the rankings, they're going to drop, and maybe they drop below Utah. I don't think you can do that personally, because BYU's loss was on the road to this Texas Tech team, whereas Utah's lost to BYU. They've lost to Texas Tech at home. I feel like you still have to keep BYU above Utah, but I think that's kind of the worry. And was this the real BYU when you face top 10 competition, and this is what would happen in the playoff? I think that's kind of the concern. But I think BYU can bounce back. I think they're better equipped to bounce back this year than they were last season. And because I felt like last year when BYU lost to Kansas, they were having flashbacks to independence, and they kind of felt like it was independence where, one loss happens, all is lost. Nothing's lost here. You win your next 3, you're going to Arlington, and you're probably getting a rematch opportunity against Texas Tech, as you noted, and Chase Roberts said. So go take care of business and go win the game, but they got to respond with authority in this game. Now we're keeping tabs on TCU and Iowa State. TCU's down 6-3 as of this recording, 10:01 in the third. So we'll see what happens with that game. That's kind of an interesting score, honestly. But, I think this BYU team, I'm really curious to see how they respond. I like, though, what the defense did as far as that pass rush, as you noted. I think that was something that you can build on. But it never felt like there was a real chance for BYU to make a run outside of that brief moment at halftime after the Raider to Mooney pass breakup. But when the offense takes the field, first offensive series of the third down, and they go 3 and out, you're like, yeah, it's not going to be BYU's day.
Yeah, I mean, there were just multiple times where it was just like they had a chance to do something and they just didn't. And you think about the Parker Kingston muff punt there. Like, we've seen that already this season, and BYU's been able to respond from it. Like, BYU can't continue to do the same things, make the same mistakes, and expect the results to be positive in their favor over and over again, especially when it's the best team that they played this season. Like, you can't expect to capitalize on those mistakes in the way that you have in previous games when the competition is much stiffer, like it was this morning. But, Mitch, I think that another point that I wanted to make that just popped in my head was there were just some confusing things as far as the coaching was concerned as well. Like, there were play calls that I thought were interesting where I'm just like, on a third down play, I'm like, why are you not running LJ Martin in this situation? Like, is the health of LJ Martin the reason why Aaron Roderick decided to do certain things on conversion type downs? Kalani Sitake decides to go for it on fourth down and short on his own 24, but then later on in that drive, they decided to punt for it.
And that was about 12 yards down the field, so it was still kind of in that same
It's just
vicinity.
like, when you're looking for momentum, like, when do you keep pressing? When do you keep being aggressive like Kalani tends to do? I just thought that there were some things that just didn't make sense. Like, at halftime, I was like, this is a really weird game. It just felt like a really weird game. Like, it was still up in the air for the outcome. BYU had every chance to make something of it.
And that's what was crazy was that it was 19-0 at one point. You're thinking it feels like it's 50-0,
right.
but it's only 19-0. It's still, I didn't think BYU was going to win the game at that point, but still, it's like you're still within striking distance, and you've been a quick strike team. But a big thing too, when you don't get chunk yardage, you don't get big plays, you're not going to do much. BYU only had 4 big plays in this game, 3 big gains through the air, 1 big gain rushing the football, and that was only 12 yards with LJ Martin. So, I mean, the chunk yardage was non-existent. Yeah. The biggest play was 21 yards, bare deep completion to Parker Kingston, and that was it. I mean, everything else was 19 yards and under.
And that came in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
So everything before that was under 20 yards. And it's just like, you can't expect to have success and score a lot of points when you're just dinking and dunking down the field.
And also that's, again, a credit to Texas Tech's defense.
Sure.
But that just, again, highlights when BYU doesn't have those chunk yardage, this could happen. Because this whole year they've always found answers, whether it's a 85-yard pass to Chase that goes nearly to the house against West Virginia, or some big play, Falatau Satawala pick 6 on defense. Like, you just lacked any sort of big plays, and that's what led to this outcome today. But again, Texas Tech's really good. I mean, this is a really good football team. I'd be fascinated to see what a potential rematch would look like. I don't think it's a guarantee to say, second time around you're going to automatically beat them. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'd like to see BYU get the chance. And I think it'd be fun to see that in Arlington, BYU and Texas Tech, if it happens again. But we had a great time here in Lubbock, Jones AT&T Stadium. We've got full coverage on KSLSports.com, the KSL Sports YouTube, and the Cougar Tracks podcast feed. So go subscribe to that. We'll have more coverage of Cougar football and BYU basketball going forward every single day here on KSLSports.com.